As we continue, the internet is buzzing with theories about Annie Guthrie, Nancy Guthrie's daughter, and her husband Tommaso Cioni. Now, many conspiracy theorists have been pointing to the idea that Annie and Tommaso are somehow involved. Law enforcement has explicitly stated that neither Annie or Tommaso have been named suspects or people of interest. Savannah herself has even come out and said that these accusations are unbearable and that they add pain onto pain. Now, these theories started swirling around when authorities went to Annie and Tommaso's house and started seizing evidence at the beginning of this investigation. We even released a picture outside Annie's house where an investigator is walking into the house with a bag over his shoulder containing what is believed to be a forensic extraction device used to access data from smartphones, SIM cards, and more. On top of that, authorities were seen on at least one occasion leaving Annie and Tommaso's house with at least one evidence bag. And it seems now more than ever, though, Annie and Tommaso have been laying low. Here to talk about that with me today is veteran FBI Special Agent Jen Coffindaffer. Jen, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, starting out, Jen, this is really interesting. It seems like the authorities at the beginning of this investigation were zoning in on Annie and Tommaso. Why could that be?
Well, I don't interpret that as zoning in on them. What I interpret that as they were the last to see her, other than Porch Guy. And because of that, that pulls an extra look at them. I mean, you have to. They're the last to have seen her. And in addition, they were her caretakers. They were the closest to her. So you always start there with any investigation and move out. And they had to do an extremely thorough job to make sure that either they were involved or weren't involved. And so it was imperative that they be thorough.
And what could that have to do with the person using that forensic extraction device? Why were the SIM cards and the computers a point of interest for authorities in this investigation?
Well, we all saw those ICAC bags, right? And anytime you see that, that is somebody that has a specialty, typically used in child abduction cases where you quickly want to extract information. And in a sense, this was no different other than it had to do with an 84-year-old woman. So their purpose was to as quickly and as expeditiously get that information from all their devices. And that's why ICAC was pulled in.
Now that we're at this point in the investigation, the authorities have come out. They said they're not looking at Annie and Tommaso. They're not suspects. They're not people of interest. Yet these conspiracy theories still continue to swirl, and it seems like it's led to Annie and Tommaso laying low. Why could that be?
Well, look, Annie and Tommaso, since they have had sort of a bead on their forehead since the beginning of this investigation, which I agree with you in large part was because of all of the activity at their house, right? There were multiple searches. There were multiple times that they went into the neighborhood and did what we call canvases. Clearly, they were looking hot and heavy at them, like I said, to either clear or to determine that they were involved. And when they took the car and it took a long time to give it back, that also led to a lot of suspicion. They gave it back, but they had torn it apart. So it took quite a lot of time to get it put back together. Nevertheless, the reason I believe they're laying so low right now is because can you imagine the people still finger pointing at them? In fact, I used to be able to find Tommaso Cioni on their list of teachers at the school that he teaches at. I can't find that anymore. Of course, that could be for a lot of reasons. Maybe they've changed how they do their website. Maybe they are keeping him off of there because of all the heat that that school would be taking. Whenever you have a mob of social media conspiracy theorists that believe no matter what's put out by law enforcement that somebody's involved, you are going to have a heavy presence of bullying and of trying to find Annie and Tommaso and following them and causing issues. So I think in large part that's why they are laying low.
When it concerns the Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos not talking to the Guthrie family, does that raise any red flags for you at all?
Yes, it does. Look, at the end of the day, his jurisdiction, he has venue. He 100% is the adjudicating authority in this particular case right now, unless it is determined that Nancy was taken across state lines or across the international border. Venue lies with him. So it makes no sense that as the person responsible for this investigation, that he is not communicating with the victim family, and that in fact, apparently, that has been passed off solely to the FBI. And I think that that is in large part based on all of the issues that have come up with Chief Nanos that we have seen in the news for the last many weeks.
That's the sentiment I'm seeing echoed throughout this community that's following this case. It's like at this point in the case, we're 109 days past. Now he's delegating tasks to the FBI. Now he's relinquishing some of that oversight that he has. Now you guys can go and interact with the family. And I think what a lot of people are saying is, hey, dude, if you just did this from day one, maybe there would have been a higher chance that Nancy Guthrie would be found. What do you say to those people that are kind of angry at Chris Nanos?
I understand it. I think all of us have the sense of why in the world from day one weren't they 100% involved in the investigation? I totally believe that there were communications. He's talked about that, but they were not allowed to utilize all their resources and to be a full part of the investigation until apparently, according to Kash Patel, day 4. That's a big problem when you have the number one resource in terms of forensic analyzing, in terms of DNA labs, in terms of boots on the ground, number of agents that would have been able to assist. None of it makes sense. The victim witness program that also the FBI has that could have been utilized to help with the family, all of that was not opened up to the Guthrie family and to the investigation until later. So the frustration is understandable.
Chris Nanos has said himself that we are very close to a breakthrough with the DNA evidence that they have, but they have been saying this for over a month now. Do you think that authorities are actually any closer to the breakthrough that Nanos is talking about?
With every day that goes by, you get closer, right? Those scientists are working and they're evaluating the hair that they have. And I believe other pieces of evidence as well. I just cannot believe that that is the only DNA that up to 5 labs are working on, and that the lab that was down in Florida was working on for all those weeks that went by before it was transferred to Quantico. So because of that, I would say absolutely any day that you work toward solving a case is a day that you get further down the road. But I honestly believe it was more of a brush off and not a necessarily true sentiment that, listen, we're right on the cusp of solving this case. I think it was more like, yeah, every day we get closer.
Now, maybe this isn't your forte, but you just have such admirable insight to this case. Um, There was recently some backlash that Nanos was facing with the Pima County Board of Supervisors, where one of the supervisors moved or motioned to vacate Sheriff Nanos from his position, which ultimately ended up in the Board of Supervisors voting 4-0 with one abstention in favor of not vacating him. They were looking at things like his leadership, his relationship with personnel on his team. They were looking at his finances. They were looking at how he's handled past investigations. How, considering his conduct with this case, does that outcome come to fruition?
I tell you what, did a lot of research on this, and the bottom line is that board has no legal authority to remove him. They have legal authority to remove him only if he refused to answer those questions and did not answer the questions that they posed to him timely. He submitted a 22-page report regarding answers to the questions that the board had, and he did it within the time frame that was allotted. Because of that, that tied their hands. There was nothing they could do. So he's an elected official. Elected officials are not treated as appointed officials. Elected officials, because it's the people's vote. That's what it's thought to be. And when you look at that, you do not want to undo what the people of Pima County want. And That's how they look at him. He was elected only about 2 years ago, and they do not have the power to undo.
Jen, thanks so much for joining me. You're absolutely fantastic as always. Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.